We're going to talk about the largest gland in the body now, and it's called a liver. The liver generally goes 3 to 3.5 pounds in an average sized individual. At times, though, it can get up as high as 7 pounds. And when it does, that isn't a very good sign. Or it can atrophy down to a very, very small size. But one thing about the liver, it's very flexible in being able to adjust itself. If you treat it right, it will come back to its normal size and stay there. The reason we're interested in the liver, because it works right in with the bowel and bloodstream routine, is that the liver is the cesspool of the body. It neutralizes. It takes the poisons from the body and transfers them into a bile solution, which acts as a laxative. Poisons from any of your other glands are drawn into the liver just like a magnet would pull metals. It draws from the pituitary, the pineal, from the thyroid, the reproductive organs, the spleen, and so forth. If the lymph system is kept clean and the bile is flowing properly, it means the liver is working good. Now the liver makes the bile, then the bile is transferred on over into the gallbladder for concentration. And here is where it sometimes causes our problems, and we have gallbladder problems. The principle of keeping the liver clean is that any poisons that come into the body, and you have a good clean lymph system, the poisons will travel directly into the liver and be neutralized. There it'll save your life. So I think that should be reason enough to even think about the liver and study it a little. We have sometimes a very severe liver condition wherein we have to work from both the inside and the outside to assist it. On the outside, we use a castor oil fomentation. To do this, we dip a flannel cloth into castor oil, sponge it out so that it isn't too drippy, and put it over the liver, which is of course the right side rib cage area, and cover that entire area with the castor oil. Put a hot water bottle over it after you put some toweling to keep it from squishing through too much, and then you leave it on as long as you can. If it is severe, sometimes it's good after 30 minutes to take it off and put a cold pack on. Cold water, just as it comes as cold as you can from the tap. Leave it on for 5 minutes. Then go back to the hot oil again and rotate. We never take the castor oil internally because this is not good for the body, but it will absorb through the skin and really cause a laxative if it's massaged on the outside of the skin. We have seen cases where the individual has used no oils inside the body, and yet through castor oil massage, the next day there has been little puddles of oil in the toilet bowl. It's gone right through the skin into the bloodstream, from the bloodstream into the bowels and out. We thought we were rather exclusive on this castor oil fomentation. Thought we were about the only ones that knew about using it. Then I found out that it had been used extensively, and one of the oldest ones I found that had recommended it was our Brigham Young. At that time they didn't have hot water bottles, and he said, if you have the bellyache, put castor oil claws on the stomach and cover it with hot rocks. That was the substitute for your hot water bottles. We work from the inside now to clean that liver out. And here we use a combination of barberry and other herbs, but just 3 parts of barberry and 1 part of wild yam, or 2 parts of sweet fennel. We'll start that liver working up really good. When the liver gets into a severe enough condition, we have what's called jaundice or hepatitis. Hepatitis is a contagious type of jaundice, and this can be a very frightening thing. We were called in a house call. A young lady had been brought back from the hospital. They figured she only had a few days to live and was in very heavy pain. This was early one morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we started this young lady on the same procedure I've just given, having her take orally a half a cup of the tea made with the barberry, which is Barberus vulgaris, 3 parts, and we used 1 part of wild yam, and had her take a half a cup every hour or so during the day. Used the castor oil fomentations and kept her on juices, and had her major on carrot juice. She was already quite yellow, and the whites of her eyes were yellow when she'd come from the hospital. Being contagious, they said for nobody to touch any of her, use any of her dinnerware or have anything to do with her bedding or anything else until it had all been sterilized. We forgot the case, and they followed on through with it, but in a few days we found out she wasn't dead. She was alive and up and at it, and I saw this young lady less than a week ago. This has been 6, 8 years, I guess, but I saw her within the last week, and she's full of life and pep and energy. One amazing thing that happens is that when the bile starts to clear itself, it will oftentimes make the skin go yellow. Many people say, oh, too much carrots, that's carotene coming out. I've seen jaundice individuals down on Skid Row in New York and other cities, yellow as saffron. And if you'd have asked them if they'd just finished some carrot juice, they'd laugh at you because they used another type of a bottle entirely. They don't even know what a carrot looks like anymore. It is not carotene that comes through, it is bile. This is because that bile starts to free itself so rapidly that the bowels, the kidneys, the lungs, and the skin can't handle it fast enough, so it takes the skin as the fastest way out, and the bile comes through the skin, causing a yellow condition. This liver, when it is kept in a good condition and your lymph system is kept clean, you could take poisons accidentally into the body and they will head straight for the liver for neutralization. But when the lymph system is all fouled up, then we're in trouble. The lymph system works with the liver so closely that we should work on both of them at the same time. And here we have in the lymph system a problem that I think it's easiest to explain how it works. If a person is bit by a snake, say on the wrist, the poisons will travel straight up that lymph system and head for the liver. But being a poison as it is, it acts like a broom, a good cleanser, and it starts cutting all the mucus and waste materials loose. And first thing we know, we have a big lump under the arm. The red streak goes up and the lump under the arm. Well, that is an accumulation of filth that has been pushed up that far. And this is a damning point. Now it's blocked, and where's the poison going? It's not going to lie idle. It heads on out into the veins, goes to the heart, and kills you. But if it can go directly to the liver, then the promise in the Bible that being bit by poisonous snakes or taking poisonous draughts into the body, you can be saved. And this is how you can be saved. So we clean out the liver and keep it clean. Number one, of course, by good foods and distilled water. We're going to keep harping on that all the way through until you jump up and down in bed in the middle of the night and say, am I taking enough good water and not good enough food? Then maybe we've won. We've got, to clean this lymph system, an interesting thing. There is a plant, one of God's good herbs, called the mullein. And the mullein, plus, that's 3 parts of mullein, plus 1 part of lobelia, is a perfect glandular food. And it works on the lymph glands, it works on most all glands very effectively and very rapidly. An example, supposing the glands in the neck are swollen, the lymph glands are sore and it's almost impossible to swallow. Upon retiring at night, as an example again, you could take a fomentation, which is soaking flannel into tea made of the 3 parts mullein, 1 part lobelia, sponging it out, and wrap it around the throat. Cover this with oiled silk, with plastic, something of this type. It's not covering a very big area, so plastic would be all right. And then put some toweling around it and go to sleep. Generally by morning, the swelling is gone. It clears so rapidly. This for other glands, swollen testicles or testicles that haven't dropped. This fomentation used 6 nights a week over a period of time will give tremendous results. In addition, drink the tea, a cup morning and night or more. If you have the mullein and lobelia in capsules, take 2 or 3 of those 3 or more times a day and drink it with plenty of liquid. This lymph system being plugged up can make plenty of sickness that is not enviable. As an example, the swollen breast, mastitis. This same formula, again, will do the job by putting the fomentation over the breast. We have seen in 1 night's time the red streaks leave the breast, and though it was swollen 3 times the size of the other breast, down to normal by morning. And in this particular case, the baby was back at the breast nursing again. That's in 1 night's time, which is very fast for mastitis. But the Lord's herbs works like they should. We have got other instances of using the mullein that shows how well it works. I'd like to use this example. While practicing in Orem, Utah, a nurse from Provo called, and she said, I have a little boy, 10 years old, who has swollen glands on the back of his neck, and they've been getting bigger day by day, and now he's passing out. He's blacking out. What can I do? I said, use 3 parts mullein, 1 part lobelia. Put the fomentation on right now and get at it. And being a learned woman, a registered nurse, she said, well, which way will it go? Will it go inside or will it come out to the outside as an ulceration and open up? I said, I don't know how it'll go, but it's got lobelia in it, and the lobelia acts as a thinking plant, and it'll know which way to go. Well, She said, I'll try it anyhow. Of course, this is ridiculous in the Orthodox schools, such a stupid thing to say. Just about a half hour after she had called, I had a long-distance call from Moses Lake, Washington. Woman said, I have a boy about 10 years old. He has a swollen gland on the back of his neck. Now, over our years of practice, the Lord has given us these examples many, many times so that we can see how they work. And she said, he passed out now, and I'm scared. I'm afraid he's going to die. So I told her 3 parts mull and 1 part lobelia. She said, how will it work? Will it go inside or the poisons or come to the outside? I said, it's got lobelia in it, and the lobelia will know which way to go. I wouldn't know. And she said, okay, if that's what you say. See, she walked by faith. She wasn't so intelligent that she could doubt. But a couple of days later, the lady, the registered nurse from Provo, called me. She said, oh, I'm so happy about that formula. I'll never lose that. It's great. I said, well, what happened? Well, she said it just took all the pain away within just a very short time. And the swelling went down and down, and by night he was playing around with no more problems. She said it just dispersed, went into the lymph system, into the liver, and went out through the bowels. She knew her program. And she said, I'm so thrilled because he came out of it so fast. Well, I was happy to hear this. This was on about a Thursday she called, and Monday I flew into Seattle on a series of lectures. And there were 3 or 4 cars came caravan across from Moses Lake, which is on the east side of Washington, and they came over to Seattle on the west side for the lecture series. And in them was a little boy, 10 years old. It was the boy this woman had called about. And here was a weak little chap, where the nurse's boy was a husky one. But the mother said, I want you to look at him. She said it saved his life because he wouldn't have lived till morning. I know this. But she said, how does he look? And I said, fine. Well, what happened? She said, well, the pain left in a very short time, but the swelling got bigger and bigger, and finally it got so big it popped open, and nearly a cup of pus ran out, and in the next 2 or 3 days, 2/3 of another cup. Well, now, this boy was so weak, such a delicate little chap, if it had gone inside his system, it would have killed him. But the lobelia, a thinking herb, and as ridiculous as it sounds, it knew far more than I'd ever know. It knew which way it was to go in both cases. So this is an extremely valuable thing for the lymph system. And it would be good to take the 3 parts mull and 1 part lobelia quite frequently. Have it as a tea. Drink it. Take the tablets or capsules, and with plenty of liquid, use them and keep that system clean. The liver good and flushed out. Use plenty of carrot juice. Your hands get yellow on the inside, the whites of your eyes get yellow, just say, glory be, I'm healing. That means that the bile is starting to break loose. And this is the best evidence that you could ever get. Don't let it frighten you. And don't let your good neighbors and friends frighten you either, because they'll warn you against using it. We've had this happen so many times. But to keep that liver now in a perfect condition, this is an area that must be fed properly, and that's with the proper mucusless diet and plenty of liquid. It is amazing how much disease can settle in the liver, and when the liver starts to go, it is a very painful and serious condition that you're suffering under. We have, I mentioned barberry, but if you can't get barberry, the Oregon grape or the Rocky Mountain grape, the root of this is the same family. They're both barbarous family, and they'll do the same job. We have Our regular formula that we have used for a long time consists of the Oregon grapefruit or the barberry, and that is generally 3 parts. Now this is the one that keeps the bile flowing. Then we have wild yam, and the wild yam disperses the gas as the bile goes in and stirs it up in the bowel area. And the fennel seed that is in it is an anti-colic herb, and it works to keep you from having a colic system upset. Catnip is an antispasmodic and a soothing herb and a relaxant herb, and it also has an anti-colic ability. You know, for babies that have colic, we give them catnip and fennel. Give it to them in a tincture or a tea, and it gives them very fast relief. We have ginger, which ginger has the power to stop pain, and it also will lead the herbs as a lead herb down into the lower cavity. And we add another herb with this combination, which is called peppermint. Peppermint is a stimulant. It isn't as strong and powerful a one as cayenne, but peppermint is a terrific stimulant that just makes every cell sit up and take notice and stimulates the whole tissue system. So this works as a companion, and when you put those herbs together, it's 3 parts of the Oregon grape and 1 part of each of the others that I have mentioned. But this will make you feel like you're living again. We're going now to go into another organ, series of organs, which is called the lungs. A person who doesn't have panic and fear and normal weight could go as high as 100 to 110 days without food. It's generally fear and panic that people die of, not starvation. A person can go up 15 or 16 days without water if they have a cool head and think right. But you can't go very long without breathing. This is the key. So you can see how important those lungs are. The lungs, the breath of life, this is the area that we've got to keep flowing and flowing smoothly, because with good deep breathing, this will offset a lot of malfunction in the body. Reoxygenation. A shallow breather is a sickly person. And this we see so often today because we have forgotten how to breathe properly. From the time the doctor spats you on the little buttocks and you take your first gasp of celestial air into your body until you're ready to die, you don't even stop to think about breathing because you do it automatically. Comes in and goes out and comes in and goes out, and that's it. But if we would do it so we could breathe deeply, then we could be healthier. We sometimes have interesting things happen to us that make us breathe deeply. I was a very, very shallow breather and sunken chested as I grew up. And when I was in my early 30s, which you'd think the body was completely matured, I was having consumption problems. The years before, I'd breathed a lot of dust in a sawmill, planing mill area, and was continuing breathing in dry dust from the cabinet shop. And my lungs were so bad it hurt to even breathe, and I was doing very shallow breathing. And I felt that I was in a serious condition, but I didn't know what to do about it. And one night I had a dream, and in this dream, a woman came to me, an ugly old lady, and she said, you're supposed to breathe deep, deep, deep. And she opened her mouth, took in great, big, deep breaths, and she had the ugliest teeth. It was very vivid. But she said, you'll keep alive if you'll learn to breathe deep. Well, I knew it was for me, and the next morning I, in a clumsy way, started to try and do some deep breathing with my mouth open and everything else. Any old way I get breath into me. I'd been doing this for about 10 days. I was walking up the street in Salt Lake, and Niels Lundwall, an author, came across to me on the sidewalk, and he said, "Ray, I haven't seen you for years. I was thinking about you this morning, and I just had a feeling that maybe I might run into you." And I dropped a little book in my briefcase, and I thought, if I get to see Ray, I'm going to give it to him. And he handed me a book. This little booklet was about breathing. And I said, "Well, thanks so much." And so I read it, and it was just a crude little book, not a lot to it, but it told me to keep my mouth shut and breathe through my nose. This was fine, and I tried this for a couple or 3 weeks, and then I ran across a book that was handed me, The Science of Breath by Yoga Ramakarachi. And this particular book, you can get it at most of your bookstores, The Science of Breath. Just tell them it's by a yogi, and they all know who he is. I don't know how to spell Ramakarachi right now. But this is the next book I took, and it was absolutely the most amazing thing, explaining the lungs and how the air worked in it, and how it reoxygenated the body and brought iron into the whole system by working with the veins. And then I started to do some deep breathing. Well, now when I'd started my breathing was so shallow that I had less than 3/4 of an inch breathing. It was just hard to just even get my chest out. Time went along, and it was time for me to go into the Army. Uncle Sam said it was anyhow. And so all this time I'd practiced my deep breathing. Sergeant measured my chest measurement when I inhaled and then exhaled, and he looked at me, and he had a higher officer come up, and then another higher officer, and finally a major or someone came up to me and said, "Would you switch from the Army and join the submarine crew?" And I said, "Why?" Well, he said, "You're to be in the medics in the Army, but we need you in the submarine crew because you have a 5.5-inch chest expansion, and we don't run into these very often." And so even in my 30s, I had changed my chest expansion to be able to handle this, and my health had improved. So these lungs are extremely important, even though they're just lying in there ignored. It would pay to do something about it. We sometimes have problems of the lungs getting filled with mucus, and we have colds, flu, and pneumonia. We have a little booklet called The Cures for the Common Cold. I'll have to get the name of that. I even forgot my own book names, but the common cold and what to do for it. The cold sheet treatment. The cold sheet treatment, yes. And it tells a lot about this. But if we will try first with the deep breathing to be sure we're not standing back of an automobile that's pouring out gas. I'm using a horrible example now, but I'm using an extreme. Let's get into the cleanest air that we can get to do our breathing. And then we want to keep away from factory contaminations, all the foul air that we have got, and get in a good place and do our deep breathing. Many times we have deep problems as asthma, and asthma is becoming one of our top killers. Here again, we need sometimes an emergency, which emergency would be your herbal aids again. One of the herbal aid combinations that we use is the use of lobelia. We always use the tincture of lobelia. Many people use the tea, but we use the tincture of lobelia because on house calls it's always been easy to carry and ready to use right now. But we have cases where they expect them to be dead by morning, and yet they're alive and live for years after. And this is how it is done. We first give a good stimulant. We like to give a cup of peppermint tea. We could give cayenne, but that would scare most of them away in the first place because they're not used to it. And they just can't take it down fast enough, but the peppermint tea they can sip a little at a time. And then 10 minutes after they've had the tea down, a teaspoonful of tincture of lobelia. Wait 10 minutes, and then the second teaspoonful of tincture of lobelia. Wait another 10 minutes, and then the third. We have never, in our own practice, have ever used over 3 teaspoons full to get the reaction moving. And the reason is, of course, because we've always been called out on emergency cases. And this is where it always works best, is when a person is at the crisis. And it's the crisis for dying, they figure. And with the right person to help and the herbs the good Lord has given us, it can be the healing crisis if we work it right. And so in this case, we sit and talk a few minutes, and then the individual starts to throw up. It being an emetic, which lobelia is, very powerfully so, an emetic. And the individual will throw and heave, and as they throw up, they'll bring everything up they've eaten for a last day, and in addition, it'll start cutting the mucus loose and the pus from the lungs and bronchioles. We have seen in one time of throwing up over a half a cup of heavy, from yellows into the greens and black, mucus and filth come out of those lungs. And they go home and go to sleep, and in many cases never have a reoccurrence. It is a one-time case. We had one case that had had it for 26 years, and had had regular office calls or house calls twice a week, average straight on through, for over 20 years. And we were called in because the doctor wasn't available at time, or they brought the man into our office at 2 o'clock in the morning. We were living right back of the office in our quarters there. And that man, though he had sat up in the chair for 20 years and had never been in the bed for over the 20 years, he came right out of it that night and never had another attack. Went home and slept in the bed that night and slept in ever since. Last time I'd heard, which had been 20 years, he'd never had another attack. But their office call was $3 at 2 o'clock in the morning even. And we threw the herbs in for good measure. So after all they had spent in 26 years, 20 concentrated years of doctoring, it was quite a relief to them. Sometimes we need just a little bit of extra help when we've got the congestion in that lung that won't relieve itself. Comfrey tea or comfrey green drink. The comfrey tea, if we take a cup of that 2 or 3 times a day, it is one of the greatest Dr. Kirchner, I believe, was the one that wrote, I think he was the one about a man that just chewed some comfrey leaves and over a period of time got rid of his asthmatic condition. We have a lung food formula with herbs that has helped many, many people who have been bothered with emphysema, with bronchitis, with TB, many tuberculosis, many types of lung congestions. And let me tell you a little bit about this one, and here's what it consists of. The marshmallow root, which is your Althea officinalis. The marshmallow, and each of these are one part, and one part of mullein, one part of comfrey, one part of lobelia, and one part of chickweed. Now, all of these herbs work so smoothly together because they work as demulcients and emollients, and they expel the mucus and break it loose. They rebuild the lungs and give them new life, and the bronchioles. They, if it's used over a period of time, you will have lungs that will be so different from what you originally had, because all we're doing is feeding again. But feeding and deep breathing, plenty of water, and a good diet, and your lungs can be brought back from close to death to good, healthy existence. We've got, over the years, a record of seeing many people helped using the old-fashioned remedies. Now, this particular remedy here that I've just given you goes back for many years. We have used it for nearly 30 ourselves, and we have seen a lot of people happier by the use of it. So we've now got some lungs that are working right, and to help get our energy into the upper lung area, sometimes it pays to do some shoulder stands or learn to use the slant board. We recommend shoulder stands in preference to headstands, because if you're not used to headstands, oftentimes the upper cervicals are not too strong, and you can twist or crack them. But with a shoulder stand, you have padding and something that the head can hang down free, and something holding up each shoulder, and your feet up in the air. And we don't advise you to stay there more than 3 or 4 hours the first day. I'm being ridiculous again because I'm giving you an extreme. We generally say count to 10, and some people count 10 by 5s and get right back down. Because you know, it's an odd thing. We stand on our feet or lie down, but we never let the head get a good flow of blood into it. And when we get into that upper attic and a good flow comes through, the head aches, and we know it's going to split wide open. It really won't, but it feels like it's going to. So just do it a little easy to start and build up gradually. Everybody needs to get some blood up into the upper part of the body, because the brain needs it, the whole system needs it. And while we're getting the blood up into the upper lobes of the lungs, remember the lungs have those upper lobes where we generally get our pneumonia, because we do such shallow breathing. So let's do it for that reason, but at the same time help the brain and get the blood going up into that area. The brain sometimes slows down, and we have a person who gets a little senile. When they get senile and we have to lead them around, we think that it's just ridiculous. But maybe we're getting that way ourselves. What actually happens is the processed foods that we have been eating, the hard waters, many grains hard, that we've been drinking, and the beverages that aren't fit to throw out in the gutter that we oftentimes spend a lot of money on, are making that brain load up with solid materials. In cases of severe senility, people, after they have died, have taken an autopsy and opened the skull up, took the top of the skull off, and there is a perfect brain, but it is in stone. That brain has turned to solid stone. And that's what we're trying to reverse right now, is to get the circulation up in there, because the brain area doesn't get enough circulation. If you want to kind of speed it up a little bit, there is a good remedy for people who start thinking slow. They feel maybe a little senile condition is coming on. You know, it's odd, but as I tell about this formula, I notice everybody grabs their pencils and gets their pen and paper at work. Well, we use a formula of the following: 3 parts of periwinkle herb, 3 parts of holy thistle, also called blessed thistle, 3 parts lily of the valley root, and 1 part lobelia. Use this while on the 3-day cleanse and the mucusless diet, but on the 3-day cleanse, use this a half a cup 3 times a day, and you will find that results will come in quite rapidly. We've used this on students who were having failing grades in college. We've had a number of them come to us, and we put them on the mucusless diet, have them go on a 3-day cleanse, and use some of this tea. And you know, within a matter of a couple of months, their grades have stepped back up again, and they feel so happy they're back in action once more. The brain is rather an important part of the body. We feel it, that we take it for granted also. And as you know, we use a very little of that brain, such a very small part of it. But by using the program I've just given you here and doing a little work on the slant board, maybe some shoulder stands, and keeping on the proper diet with plenty of water to flush out those inorganic minerals that have been accepted but not assimilated, if we will do this, you'll find that brain will be very, very happy. And if we follow these things, even hidden treasures of knowledge will come to us. And those hidden treasures can give us the key for some of the things we'll be needing in the next few years. Let's take a little time now for questions.
In addition to this program that you've given us for lung problems like emphysema, what would there be anything additional like fomentations? Would this be helpful?
Yes, external work is always good. Like in our book, The Incurables, the 3-oil massage is excellent, especially up on the upper part of the body where the lung area is. And that massage, we go into the 2 days of castor oil, 2 days of olive oil, 2 days of wheat germ oil, and a day of rest, and keep repeating this. Now we have, for a severe lung condition, if we would use the formula called the bone, flesh, and cartilage, it's also called the comfrey fomentation. It has 10 or 12 herbs in it. This also will work very rapidly as a fomentation. We'll go into that more a little later.
Dr. Christopher, someone has called that comfrey, the comfrey, powdered comfrey. I saw a label on the bottle. It said people putty.
People putty. Hey, that's all right. You can make yourself in any shape.
I wanted to ask now to get your lymph system really clean. I mean, how do you do that? I've been working on mine for a long time. You try lots of different things, but would it be feasible to just take these cleanses over and over and over?
Oh, yes. You know, the 3-day cleanse is just part of living. That's a tune-up. That's your valve tune-up, you know. And it pays to have that car tuned up once in a while, or it starts whacking and hacking. So we say every month or two, have the 3-day cleanse. But remember the water. The water is so important because it does miracles. It's not nutritional, but it sure is a good flusher-upper. It's excellent.
Dr. Christopher, could you tell us some of the precautions and dangers perhaps in eating liver? I have heard that there are some possible problems eating liver because, as you explained, it is a toxin point, a point for gathering toxins in an animal, for example.
Some doctors say, oh, that cleans right out immediately and it's impossible for any of that to be left in there, but we feel a lot different about this. We've had a lot of experience working with livers in birds and animals over the years. And a veterinarian doctor at the Utah Poultry and myself did an experiment with 5 turkeys. And this was in the years before they used to have them dressed and cleaned like they do now. As they came through, they still were all completely equipped with their innards. And so as the birds came out, we took the beautiful big birds that looked the choicest, and out of 5, 4 of them, as we opened them up, had infection in the liver. And some of that infection was horrible looking stuff, but they looked so healthy from the outside. This condition of eating the liver is supposedly a very healthy thing, but to me it's rather obnoxious, because as the animal or the bird is being prepared for the slaughter block, fear comes into them, and that fear from the adrenals goes through the whole body. And as a cat is scared when it after it's eaten a meal, it'll hiss and arch up its back, and they'll oftentimes throw up their meal because it's poisoned them just from fear alone. Well, each animal has the inherent sense that they're going to be killed, and that fear goes into the liver as well as the rest of the animal, but it does go very heavily into that liver area, and you're taking on some of that problem. We are vegetarians built as vegetarians, as the gorilla is. And I don't think the gorilla ever drops down to the meat shop to buy a pound of liver. And he gets along pretty good without it. He eats fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds and does really well.
Clarify one point. If you were to observe lymphatic congestion, for instance, in the iris of the eye, would the mullein and lobelia be the better formula than the lung formula, which has other added herbs? Would this be?
If it is a lymph condition that is rather severe, and there right now, a lymphatic rosary or something of this type, I would go right into the mullein and lobelia and use it in large amounts. Use ample. This is one of the first places to start. That for the lungs will work on the lungs more than it will the lymphatic system itself.
Dr. Christopher, in the case of the stimulant you mentioned for senility, to fight senility, or speed up the processes, does the waking up effect of cayenne, for example, would that indicate that would be good to use also to counteract the slow circulation in the brain?
Cayenne will work in any part of the body. The good thing about cayenne, and all stimulants, but cayenne is most pronounced in that it equalizes the bloodstream. This is the key. Where the bloodstream is concentrated in a specific area, your cayenne will make it equalize. Take as an example, a gunshot wound. Right, you take cayenne and the bleeding stops by the time you count to 10. Sometimes less. But it isn't because the cayenne has gone there and done the job. The cayenne has taken the blood which is rushing to where the wound is and redistributed it and taken the pressure off of where the wound is and letting it coagulate. And that is how it stops. Yes, your cayenne is good for the brain. It's good for any part of the body.
Dr. Christopher, another question has come up, and I'm relaying the question to you. This is on the breathing. Is there any specified or better way to breathe under different atmospheric conditions, or does it matter?
I don't quite follow you.
Is there any special way to breathe, for example, in different temperatures or environments that is better than another?
Well, our recommendation has always been to breathe through the nose, because the nose is a very fine piece of equipment. We find many people are mouth breathers today, and when they breathe through the mouth, all the dirt and filth and germs go directly on in, and nothing is filtered out at all. But when you breathe through the nose, you have a filtering system in there, but you also have something else. You have an equalization system that when the air comes in, if you had been out with me in Evanston, Wyoming, when I used to go out on house calls at 40 and 45 below zero. Right, you get out with me on one of those calls, maybe I'd go 50 miles, but you'd take a big deep breath through your mouth, fall over dead, because that air go right into the lung area and kill you. But breathe through the nose, it's 45 below zero at the bottom of the nose. And 2 inches higher up, give or take according to the nationality, you will find that it's 98.6. Now, any man that can invent something as great as that, he might write something as a special, like deity, under his name. But only God could do something as wonderful as that. If you are in a burning building at 600 or 700 degrees Fahrenheit, right, you breathe through your mouth, it'll kill you right now. But through the nose, It'll drop it from 400 or 500 degrees to 98.6. So here is, I think, one of the finest things, and we do have something to open up that head area so that you can breathe through the nose again, even though you've been breathing through the mouth for a long time, and it's called horseradish. Just take some apple cider vinegar, grate horseradish into it, so that it's a thick slush, and start off with 1/3 of a teaspoon. Chew it thoroughly, and when all the strength is out of it, swallow the pulp. You can tell when the strength is out because you have quit bawling and you pulled your scalp off the ceiling. But you do this 3 times a day. And then each 3 days, step it up 1/3 of a teaspoon until you get up to a teaspoon 3 times a day. And you'll be a nose breather. Unless, of course, there is a broken or a deformed condition, of course.
Dr. Christopher, I'm relaying another question that has been passed to me. The question is regarding lobelia. There has been criticism on the use of it because of the fear that it might be toxic. Many people have taken lobelia and felt so deathly sick that they felt for sure it was something that would be bad for them.
Yes, they knew it was going to kill them right now, but it never does. It's as harmless as water, but one of the most powerful herbs known to mankind. I have taken personally 4 tablespoonsful of tincture of lobelia seed in one sitting, mixed with honey and distilled water, not knowing that it was. I thought it was just vinegar. But I took the 4 tablespoonsful, and yes, I knew I was going to die. But I didn't. It sure cleaned me out. I felt better than I'd felt for a long time. It can't do anything but clean you out good. It is harmless. We have given it to little babies, days old, little newborn babies, as we have given cayenne tea to little new babies that have bronchial problems and pull them out of their conditions. So this is something, don't be afraid of the good herbs, because